I'm staff for the Rappahannock River Basin Commission, and we're going to kind of go around the room and introduce ourselves. And I'm going to start with Jillian.
Good morning, Jillian Saul, RRBC staff.
And let's, Deirdre, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning. This is Deirdre Clark with John Marshall Soil and Water Conservation District serving Fauquier County.
Great. Thanks, Deirdre. I'm going to mute you because you're getting some cross static or something. Okay, next we'll go with Sarah.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Parmalee, Culpeper Land Use Representative for PEC.
Okay, Brent.
Good morning, Brent Hunsinger, Friends of the Rappahannock, attempting to fend off a very rambunctious yellow lab this morning.
All right, and John McCarthy.
Good morning, John McCarthy, Senior Advisor, Piedmont Environmental Council.
All right, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle Edwards, Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission.
Okay, Harrison.
Morning, Harrison Bremen with Culpeper County Planning and Zoning.
All right, John Saunders.
John Saunders, Stafford County Environmental.
All right, Meredith.
Good morning, I'm the environmental planner with George Washington Regional Commission.
Good morning, Meredith, and welcome to the group. Don.
Good morning, Don McCowan with Piedmont Environmental Council.
Sarah. Sarah too.
Sarah Holberg, Land Use Planning Consultant for the Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley.
And let's see, I've got a phone number, and that's 804-370-4057.
Yes, this is Brian Johnson with Virginia Farm Bureau.
Welcome, Brian. Okay, we might have one or two more people pop in as we go, but what I'd like to do is go ahead and get us started. And as those who have been participating in this since March, we've been fielding perspectives from every stakeholder group we could identify on utility scale solar at the request of the Rappahannock River Basin Commission members. And we're at the end of our list that we put together early on of who to invite. And so our cleanup batter is Stephanie Kane with Old Dominion Electric Cooperative. And Stephanie, rather than belabor all the introduction, you're ready to take it away, and then we'll talk about as a group where we go from here after Stephanie's presentation, and an opportunity for folks to ask questions. So take it away, Stephanie.
Great, thank you, Eldon, and thank you to everyone on the commission who I have the pleasure of speaking with today. I appreciate the electric cooperatives being invited to participate in this, and have been really impressed with the prior meetings of the technical committee that I've reviewed. So I appreciate being here, and I'm here to share information with you all about solar in electric cooperative territory. And I am going to get my slideshow going. All right, great. Do you all see that as expected and hoped for? Okay, great. So my name is Stephanie Kane. I work for Old Dominion Electric Cooperative, heading up government relations for them as the Director of Government Relations and External Affairs. And today I want to talk about the co-op business model, and then our strategic direction with our energy generation mix and how that all ties to solar development in Virginia. Please do feel free to interject with questions, or Eldon, I'll lean on you if questions are put in the chat to interject those. So Virginia has 13 electric cooperatives. This is a map of our trade association. The co-ops are in the trade association are in Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. And so I just wanted to give a footprint of the entire co-op space. As you can see, we've got the Delmarva Peninsula included with the rest of Virginia. And these are distribution cooperatives. So if you think about electricity as water through the hose, the distribution co-ops are the hose, and then my co-op, Old Dominion Electric Cooperative, is the water or the power that's going through. And I want to share the 15 logos of the co-ops that are members of the association, just as a visual nod to the fact that it is 15 different companies. And the co-ops are of varying sizes. They've got everywhere from 7,000 meters to 150 or 170,000. So it's a lot of different kinds of utilities working together. And to go through the co-op business model, I'm sure many of you are familiar with cooperatives, but we are owned by our members, the folks who receive the power. And because of that ownership structure, and then we're governed by the board of directors at each of the co-ops. And because of that structure, we're not beholden to ratepay or to shareholders. It's a not-for-profit business model in which everything is very member driven. All the decision making is member driven. And we have a capital credits program, which is a long-term financing program for our infrastructure that allows us to, when in lieu of having profits, that money goes back to our members eventually. And because we are not for profit, we also are tax exempt. And this is very relevant in the solar space because up until very, very recently, the federal tax incentives for solar have not been something that the electric cooperatives have been able to monetize up until this point. And so that changed this year, which I will get to towards the end of my presentation. And the distribution co-ops are regulated at the state level by the State Corporation Commission. ODEC, we are power supply for the co-ops, and we are regulated at the federal level. But we, of course, also are beholden to state laws and regulations. And as well as I work with all levels of government, state, federal, and local, particularly on permitting solar projects. In fact, that's like the most active policymaking space for my work at ODEC. I want to mention the 7 cooperative principles. As I mentioned, it really is a ground up organization. And in particular, I think the most important and sort of the principle that rules them all is cooperation among cooperatives. We really work together with these different size organizations to develop programs that work for our members. And everything comes back to the membership and the bottom up business model. And then for funding sources, we've got the rural utility service, and then the co-ops love co-ops. So CoBank and the Cooperative Federal Credit Union are also made of cooperatives. It's also a cooperative business model. And one thing I want to mention or want to move to is ways that cooperatives are leading the way in the energy space as a utility. Because there are such different sizes of co-ops, we say that we're small enough to innovate and pilot new programs. And so in the solar generation space, we've had a lot of firsts that I think are very noteworthy in Virginia, specifically first in Virginia with community solar, and to file a program under the 2017 Community Solar Act. So the co-ops really had the first true community solar program that actually had subscribers. And we have a number of co-ops that have that, and then others that are doing that through ODEC. And we've expanded net metering caps. There was the Sierra Club calls it their solar freedom bill. The co-ops got on board with that in 2019. And as a result, notably, we were not written into the rules of the Virginia Clean Economy Act in 2020, because you see these things that we have all of these goals, like we're already doing it. We're walking the walk on moving towards a more renewable future. And my organization, ODEC, is the second generation and transmission cooperative in the country that has a net zero carbon goal. And what I think is important to point out about that, not only is it noteworthy that we're second in the nation to have that, but if that's a de facto goal then for our 11 member cooperatives, because they get their power from us. So that means that all of those co-ops also have that shared goal with us. And so I want to talk a little bit about who ODEC is. I mentioned the co-ops love co-ops. So we are an electric cooperative made of our 11 distribution cooperative members. So this is a slightly smaller map than our association has a few additional co-ops that we do not provide power to, but we've got 11 members. 9 of them are in Virginia. And this covers 70 counties across Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. And we provide power to 1.5 million people. So it's interesting to see, as I mentioned, the variety that we have in our membership and the statewide footprint that we have and ways that our members are able to innovate and pursue their different kinds of generation goals that they have. As far as ODEC's generation mix, so we are what they call a generation and transmission electric cooperative. We have 3 natural gas facilities. We share half ownership of a coal facility with Dominion. We also have partial ownership of a nuclear facility with them, their North Anna facility. And then we have wind and solar contracts peppered throughout Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania. And then we buy about 38% of our needs on the PJM market. So I wanted to show what our current generation mix is, and then also how far we've come since 2005. That 2005, 2006 tend to be the year that when you hear about carbon emissions goals, that's around the year that they use as a standard for working to improve. So I just wanted to show, how much progress we've made in the last 15, 16 years. And on that note, we have announced in 2020 our carbon emissions, a net zero carbon goal to get to 50% intensity reduction by 2030 and then net zero by 2050, which is not quite on the same timeline as the Clean Economy Act, but very close. And we have been pursuing renewables for more than a decade. We have, as I mentioned, contracts for wind. We have a smaller contract for landfill gas to energy, which is essentially methane capture and also considered renewable. And then we have contracts for 40 megawatts of utility scale solar in Virginia and distributed solar as well, which I'm going to go into in future slides with the pursuit of 300 megawatts more of solar, both distributed and utility. So regarding solar, existing solar in co-op territory, I mentioned we've got 40 megawatts of PPAs, power purchase agreements throughout Virginia, which breaks out to 3 different projects. These were contracts signed in 2015 and 2020, so we are actively pursuing these. And I know this group is focused on learning about utility scale solar, so I preface to Eldon that we don't have as robust of a utility scale solar as other, the investor owned utilities and other power providers, but we do have some, and part of reaching that goal in the future is absolutely going to require more utility scale. But in the past few years, we've really put an emphasis on, the co-ops are very local. We are really entrenched in our communities, and we've put an emphasis on local power. And so we do that through our distributed solar program. And so what that entails, or has in recent years, in 2019, we put out a competitive RFP and we selected a company called EDF Renewables to help us pursue solar projects. As I mentioned previously, because we are tax exempt and we can't monetize tax incentives for solar programs. So we partner with a private for-profit developer and are able to split those incentives and benefits and also risks. So just a couple weeks ago, we had an exciting announcement that about half of those projects are now beginning construction, which is very exciting. But you can see that took a few years just to get through like the county level permitting. There are certainly hurdles ahead for solar development, and we've got this is about half of the projects have begun construction, and we're still continuing to work with them on future projects. So those stretch across the ODEC membership territory. That includes Rappahannock Electric Cooperative. Actually, 3 of these projects are in Rappahannock's territory. And the great thing that is really unique about these is that so we call them distributed solar because they are distributed on the local power grid. They will stay, those 3 projects for Rappahannock will stay with Rappahannock and will benefit the members directly by giving them the opportunity to either just apply a straight, financial credit to, they'll spend less money because they're creating this power in their own backyard. And we've also talked about expanding it to have an option for community or shared solar programs as well. And so really what's unique about it is that it's highly localized. It stays on the local grid. That's great for grid reliability, in the event of something bad happening. So this has been very popular and a positive move for our co-ops, and something that we're going to continue to pursue development of. Although I will note it's not an exclusive RFP contract. So we also are looking, I mentioned one of the utility scales projects was just signed in 2020 as well. So we're not disinterested in other solar projects just because we have partnered with EDF on a certain number. And so then thinking about how we continue to develop solar in the future, I think it's important to note that ODEC is power supply for our members. So by and large, it's going to come through us. We have a requirement that a high percentage of our members' power purchases are from ODEC. And that's so that we can maintain financial viability. That's for our financial health. But just speaking to the challenges, there's NERCO is the National Renewables Cooperative Organization. So we could either ODEC could put out an RFP as we did when we selected EDF, or recently we worked with NERCO for them to help us with an RFP, or a large nationwide solar developer could even go to NERCO, say if they were interested in getting into Virginia and learning about that. But what we've found are that there, are a number of challenges facing solar deployment and development in Virginia, both at the state level and at the PJM level. PJM is the regional transmission organization that Virginia is a part of. And so that comes, I think these buckets kind of all these items listed really fall in the time and money category for actually bringing a solar project to fruition. And an example of that is when we worked with NERCO recently, just in the 2 years since between COVID and the war in Ukraine and inflation, the cost of what we thought we would be able to lock in prices from a private solar developer doubled over the course of 2 years. And that means it's also doubling for them. It's doubling for us to buy it from them, but that means their costs are also going up. I mentioned the supply chain. If you haven't heard about the PJMQ reform, they approve solar projects. They monitor all of the transmission needs throughout a 13-state footprint. And it was a not a great system where essentially if it could have been a 5 megawatt, a small project, if they came on and they tripped the circuit that that new transmission was needed, then that 5 megawatt project was stuck with the entire bill. And so, but not only that, that would also allow them, you could decide, I don't want to move forward with that because it's not economically, it doesn't make any sense. But so then they would just get out of line. And then the next person, so there were, I don't know how many excessive applications there were, but you kind of would go in and see how you lucked out and where you landed in the line. And so they're going through a huge reform process right now that's going to take, if you haven't started trying to permit or get an interconnection approval from PJM, they've estimated that's 4 to 5 years out. So it's really going to slow down development of solar. And then I do want to mention county permitting, and there's a lot of tension in Virginia over land use and preserving agricultural land and deploying and developing solar. So that has become very fraught, and there's a particularly large work group this summer that has just concluded that, you know, there were a lot of good conversations, but I don't know that there, even after that DEQ regulatory advisory panel, I don't know that a lot of consensus was reached on how we do this the right way. You know, I was at the Virginia Association of Counties annual conference just earlier this week and heard a lot of counties, you know, really asking like DEQ for help, that like they don't have the resources and the manpower to feel like they're taking, you know, like adequately protecting themselves or taking the right approach. So county permitting, I think, is particularly fraught, in addition to the more standardized DEQ permitting, which is more of the engineering stuff on the county level. I think there's also an emotional element that's playing into it. So there's a number of challenges, and, you know, it's going to keep me busy for years to come as we work towards our renewables goals and carbon emissions goals. But there is hope. I mean, one very noteworthy thing, in the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed this year, finally, after 20 years of efforts, the electric cooperatives are able to have direct pay incentives in lieu of tax credits for development of renewables. So that is huge. And that, you know, I could see that in maybe a few years leading to, instead of ODAC working with a third party and having to split the benefits, you know, we can go after that ourselves. And in fact, we even have a position open for a manager of renewables origination. So we're definitely moving in that direction, while also making sure that we provide reliable electricity. I mean, we got to keep the lights on first and foremost. And I just also I guess I would end on saying, like, please come talk to us, the co-op. I mean, we are out in the community. We want to work with our members. Everything is member driven for us, including these programs that I've mentioned today. So yeah, I think that honestly about winds it up. I will end on this slide with my contact information. I encourage you to reach out at any point. And I'm including Lindsay Watson from Rappahannock Electric, was not able to be on the call with me today, but she is Rappahannock's Director of Government Relations, and specifically asked me to include her contact information as well, if anyone would like to reach out to her.
Thank you, Stephanie. Questions? Feel free to come off mute and ask your question.
I know it's not as heavily technical as some of the other utilities, so it's not quite on the utility scale, but we're working on it.
Well, I'm going to kick things off. I've got a couple questions for you, and no, what you make clear to us is your universe is quite different from Dominion's, and that's very important for us to know and understand. You mentioned 3 projects of Rappahannock Electric Cooperative, and I would assume that those are more likely than any others to be within our geographic, the Rappahannock watershed. What are those 3 projects, and where are they?
They are, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because it's, if you don't mind. I've got that list on hand, is why I had a feeling this question might come up. So they are in, so oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm comparing them against the others. So none of those are the ones that are recently under construction. But they're in different points of permitting. Like one, for example, is like in the stormwater approval process right now.
Okay.
We had 2 recently approved by the Caroline County Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
So those will need to be like they'll now file their interconnection application. So, and this is a little bit of chicken and egg. I think it's part of the tension with the counties. Typically, you wait until you get the county approval. They're doing DEQ stuff alongside it, but they're 2 separate entities and 2 separate permit processes. But you wait until you get the county approval until you apply for interconnection. And that's because the county is, I would say, the most like unknown element that you might get a no. And so but I think the counties, I mean, based on like the work group I was involved this summer, I know that they're frustrated with not being looped in earlier on a project and feeling like they don't have all the engineering studies that they'd like to be able to look at to more thoughtfully consider. And it's tough because, you know, there are some solar projects that it really gave the solar industry a black eye in Virginia. Like we were very thoughtful in selecting EDF because they've got 25 years of experience. I feel like with our projects, you get the best of all worlds because you get the technical experience of a very skilled, you know, established solar developer. And then you also get the local co-op who has the community's best interest at heart. Sorry, that's kind of an aside, but I do want to mention it. And then another one of the projects is in the feasibility study stage. And yeah, and then I mentioned the one that's in the stormwater approval. I'm not seeing, I thought I had written down the, I know 2 are in Caroline County, but unfortunately I don't have it on hand where the counties of the other 2.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. So in other words, you went through the Caroline County ordinance process, which has been that's been held up to us as an example a couple of times during the course of our discussions over the last many months as a particularly good example of a local ordinance. Second question's a little broader. What are some of the key public policy concerns or priorities that ODAC has relative to solar?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, well, and I will just quickly offer like a high level description of the 2 that went before Caroline County, because my understanding is that's the first solar projects that they've approved. Like those, but it's 2 5-megawatt projects. And I mean, one has like 2,000 feet of buffer. Like we found a great landowner who like in the reality is his kids don't want to farm. And so he's going to farm part of it, but also have solar as like something to leave to them. But they've got tons of acreage in addition and are being very thoughtful about and, you know, very concerned about stormwater runoff and like making sure that they're adequate. Like in the EDF included like a lot of proffers about stormwater runoff and retention ponds. And, you know, they had done a whole wetlands analysis and things like that. So they had really good setbacks. I think depending from the angle, it's a little bit of a slope. Like there are parts of it you won't see from the road, and they're leaving like 100 feet of vegetation, things like that. So they're really doing them the right way. From a policy perspective, I would say that, you know, we want to continue marching towards our renewables goals. And I see these timelines stretching out years. So that concerns me as far as being able to meet sustainability goals that we have. I think candidly, we're going to be playing defense this session and seeing what comes through. I think that we would like the flexibility to be able to still work towards these things, you know, moving forward on solar projects. So not having them, it concerns me that, you know, counties will start instituting moratoriums. I would hope that particularly because we have projects that stay on the local grid, that counties might consider making an exception for co-op projects, for example. So yeah, I think we want to be able to continue pursuing these without being like also forced too fast. Like I think we're very fortunate that we are self-led in our pursuit of renewables. So.
Thank you. And I see Michelle has a question. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yes, thank you. Can you give me a sense, your distributed solar certainly very interests me a lot. There's lots of benefits of that as opposed to the other utility scale solar. Can you give me a better sense when the 2 to 5 megawatts each for these projects, what kind of acreage or what is the range of acreage that we're talking about? So I can better visualize what these projects are like compared to the utility scale that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll say, excuse me, first and foremost, the size, the 2 to 5 megawatts is typically driven by what's available on the local distribution network and like at the substation. So we worked with our members to identify areas that still had space. You know, you can kind of think about the distribution facilities as like a highway that you know, it fills up. And so in the case of the 2 5-megawatt projects I was just talking about, those 5 megawatts are using up about 300 acres each for the panels. No, excuse me, 50 acres each on 300-acre plots. So, and that's partially because we have a great landowner. But yeah, I think the sort of very rough estimate, it depends on the land because you can't, you know, if there's like pockets of wetlands and stuff, you can't put solar panels there, but generally speaking, it's like 10 acres to 1 megawatt is sort of the prevailing wisdom.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Okay, next on the question list is Harrison.
Hello?
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry, my mic does a thing where if I turn off the video, all of a sudden it disconnects my mic, so sorry about that. So 2 quick questions. One, so with your community scale level projects, due to their scope and scale, they still have to have a like a substation distribution hub type of thing to connect to the overall grid, just due to the sizing?
Yes, but it doesn't leave the co-op's territory. So it doesn't like go back out to the PJM system.
Okay, awesome. And then another more broader question was, so obviously, you know, distributive scale, you know, especially when you get down to even lower than community scale, like when you're talking about, you know, individual structures and private adoption and whatnot, obviously has a very limited return for you guys and for utility scale, for utility distributors and whatnot. And I'm wondering, is that just like a market inevitability, or is there something or some avenue of thought that could possibly tip the scales towards that direction, towards a more distributive push? Yeah, if that makes sense.
So are you referring to like rooftop solar or like net metering on farms?
Yeah, a little bit of everything in terms of just, you know, when you start having, you know, trying to ramp up like significant adoption at the private level, you know, whether that be rooftop or whatnot, you know, in terms of trying to like just spread out that renewable portfolio. So you end up not having, you know, these 300+ acre utility scale, or even, because some places are even a bit concerned about community scale based off of previous utility scale projects. I'm just wondering if trying to find ways to incentivize or promote like a distributive scale would actually be something useful and or something realistic, or if regardless of what is done would not be a suitable return on investment.
Yeah, well, you're right that, you know, with economies of scale, like that's what makes the larger projects more, well, for us, they're not profitable, but they're more valuable and financially beneficial. But I think it honestly comes down to financial incentives, like the federal tax incentives have worked up to this point. And candidly, that's kind of on my to-do list, is to read through the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act and better understand what money is out there, because we want to help our members go get it. The reason we offer those programs already, like the net metering and, you know, more like residential or individual customer oriented programs, is because members wanted them. So like we will devise a program that gets our members what they want. But I think the biggest thing is like cost of installation. So really it's like financial incentives, whether that is at the state or federal level.
Okay, next question, Tommy.
Thank you. This is Tommy Blackwell, Commissioner of the Revenue in Essex County, and I've been working to try to with the technical committee for the Rappahannock River Basin Commission to track where utility scale solar is currently and projected to be developed in the Rappahannock River Basin. And I have notes that say that ODAC is working with EDF Renewables on 5 projects in Richmond County with Northern Neck Electric. Do you have any insight into what stage that development is?
Yes, that is one that we recently began construction on. So that one is fully permitted and we'll be getting underway. I don't think it's 5 different projects. I think it may be a 5 megawatt project.
It listed as 6.5 megawatts. I don't know where my notes came from. It just said it would construct 5 projects with a total of 6.5 megawatts. I'm not sure where I got that note. I made a note, but I can't source it right now.
Well, I would be happy to, I can get your contact from Eldon and I'd be happy to send you like our press release on those recent projects and more specific information so that you know you've got accurate info.
I could certainly look it up if it's on your website. I'd be happy to do that, and you don't need to send it to me.
Okay, I believe the press release is listed, which would have the megawatts and Northern Neck Electric. We announced 5 projects in one press release, which also may be where the confusion and
yeah, that might be okay.
Is coming from.
Thank you.
Is that a ODEC press release or Northern Neck?
It is a EDF and
ODEC.
And ODEC. It was a shared release, yeah, because we're partners on it. So
okay. Any other questions? I don't see any other hands raised at the moment. Okay. Stephanie, thank you very much. It gives a good added perspective, and anybody in the group who comes up with a question later and needs to contact Stephanie, you don't have her you didn't pick up the contact information, just let me know. And we'll get Stephanie's slides from her and get those posted to the website. With that, let's talk for a minute of how we go forward. Obviously, we've got to give a report to the commission at their next meeting, which is December 7th. We're obviously not going to get a written report of everything we've done since March and all the different things that we've heard by the December meeting. That's going to come in 23. And what we're talking about doing is putting together a draft. The draft will go out to everybody who has participated in this process over the last many months, technical committee, as well as presenters, with kind of okay, what did we miss? What did we get wrong? What do we need to say a little differently before we finalize our report to the commission and really become a public document. And I'm interested in if anybody's got any thoughts or ideas relative to that, and please weigh in now or as we go forward. But love to hear any. Let's see, I think Michael Volpe has his hand raised.
Yeah. Hey, Eldon, Mike Volpe with Open Road Renewables. We're a utility scale solar development company. We've been active in the state for 6 years. And I want to say thank you to you and everybody that's joined. One of the observations as we continue to work with local communities and local elected officials is that projects should really be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. and that the facts matter, the siting matters, the proposals that are being made to address concerns relating to stormwater runoff, aesthetics, drain tile, compatibility with the local ag community cannot really be looked at from a one-size-fits-all perspective. And that in looking at things on a case-by-case basis, one of the observations that we have is that there may be the opportunity to address the concerns and find win-wins, and there may not. But that in thinking about projects, each project is unique, each community is unique, each soil type is unique, and that our message when we work with folks, and I think it would resonate with folks here, is there may be some preferences one way or the other, but that each project deserves the rigor of the review on a case-by-case basis, and that there really is a lot of technical expertise that the local elected folks can go find resources that have been down the path before by working with others in other localities, and that the industry has certainly learned a lot, but that you really want to have a very good understanding of the concerns and whether they can be addressed with comprehensive permitting conditions or not on a case-by-case basis. Hope that framing is helpful as we think about next steps here.
Speaking for myself personally, I think it's very helpful, and you make very valid points, Michael. And I think when I look at it from a state policy perspective, that philosophy was a big driver in the statute change that allowed for the siting agreements as one of the vehicles for localities to manage such projects.
That's right. Yeah, and the siting agreement came from Delegate Keith Hodges.
We know.
That came from the Walnut Project that we developed and worked with Tom Schwartzwelder, and the ability to not only address community concerns and construction and operation related concerns, but to shape a cash flow profile via the voluntary payments and the siting agreement that addresses the high-speed internet needs. It sort of goes to that case-by-case review, and the opportunity through the permitting exercise to mold the project so that it can become a win-win is something that we have observed that, it takes a good amount of time, but I think the solar development community, at least the good developers out there, would appreciate the opportunity to try and work in good faith to mold an outcome that does arrive at that win-win element. And that if the development community or the developers in the locality don't have that posture, well, that's sort of instructive. But if they do have the posture of, hey, how do we shape this to address the concerns and find win-wins, that's sort of where the juice is from our perspective.
Thank you, Michael. Other comments, perspectives? Okay, with that, what I've done on this agenda, since this is our last meeting of the calendar year, and that the commission operates on by statute on a calendar year basis, rather than on a state fiscal year basis. You see the proposed meeting schedule for next year on your agenda. If any of those give anybody concern, let me know. This is kind of the opportunity to do that here, but also as we, that was interesting. I wonder what that was. Excuse me, my screen just blipped. Anyway, then you also see the upcoming commission meeting schedule going forward. And that in keeping with what I just said about our annual cycle, the March 2023 meeting will be the organizing meeting of the commission for the calendar year. Something that we have ahead of us as a commission, just so people are aware, is with the next General Assembly election cycle, the new districts will come into play. And so January 1 of 2024, our state representatives districts will change. As a matter of fact, we're having some discussion as to whether the statute change bill will be put forward in this General Assembly session with a delayed enactment to January 1, 2024, or if we wait till the 2024 session. That decision hasn't been made. Anyway, so with that, I'm going to give everybody an hour plus back of your time. Any final parting comments for the technical committee for 2022? Okay. Again, Stephanie, thank you very much. That was very helpful. And folks, I look forward to discussions with many of you as we try to pull all this together into the new year for a document that can be useful to our commission members, our local elected officials, and our state representatives.
All right. See y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
everyone for having me.